He mocked his blind wife on live TV. And at first,
People laughed.
but seconds later, everything changed because what she said next exposed a truth that destroyed him in front of everyone. Ethan Cole was the kind of man people admired before they even met him. He had everything:
Fame.
money,
Power.
and a face the camera loved. In Korea's film industry, his name wasn't just known, it was respected. Every movie he starred in became a success. Every appearance he made drew attention. And every word he spoke, people listened. But behind that polished image, there was something people didn't see. Something small at first. Something easy to ignore. Ethan hated imperfections.
Not openly.
Not in a way people could easily point out, but in subtle ways. Quiet ways. Ways that only someone close to him would notice. And Lila Monroe noticed everything. Even without her sight. She had met Ethan years ago, long before the fame reached its peak. Back when things were simpler. Back when he still laughed without thinking. Back when he didn't care how the world saw him. She remembered those days clearly, because back then, he was different.
Kinder. Softer.
Real. Lila had lost her sight when she was younger, an accident no one ever fully talked about. She never liked to explain it, not because she was ashamed, but because she had already accepted it. To her, blindness wasn't a weakness. It was just part of her life. She adapted, learned, grew stronger, and somehow, she saw people more clearly than most, especially Ethan. In the early days, he admired her. The way she spoke, the way she listened, the way she understood things without needing to see them. He once told her, quietly, "You see more than anyone I know."
And he meant it.
Or, at least, he did back then. Their relationship grew naturally. No pressure. No spotlight. Just two people finding comfort in each other. But everything changed when fame took over.
Slowly. Quietly.
At first, it was small things. Ethan started correcting how she spoke in public, guiding her movements more than necessary, interrupting her mid-sentence. Then came the looks, the subtle embarrassment, the way he would hesitate before introducing her to certain people. And Lila felt it. Every time.
Even when he didn't say anything.
Because she didn't need eyes to notice distance. She could hear it. In his voice. In his tone. In the pauses between his words. Still, she stayed. Not because she was weak, but because she believed in who he used to be. She believed that version of him was still there. Somewhere. Hidden beneath the pressure. The fame. The expectations. And for a long time, she was right. There were moments. Small ones. Where he would come back. Late at night. Exhausted. Quiet. And he would sit beside her. Say nothing. Just hold her hand. Those were the moments she held on to. The moments that kept her grounded. But even those started to disappear. Because the higher Ethan climbed, the more he began to care about how things looked. And Lila didn't fit that perfect image anymore. Not in his world. Not on red carpets. Not in interviews. Not in front of flashing cameras. And tonight, that truth was about to be exposed. The award night was the biggest event of the year. Celebrities everywhere. Cameras flashing endlessly. The kind of place where every movement mattered. Every expression. Every word. Ethan was nominated. Again. And expectations were high. He was almost guaranteed to win. Which meant all eyes would be on him. And by extension, on her. Backstage, Lila stood quietly as stylists moved around her. Adjusting her dress. Fixing details she couldn't see. But she didn't complain.
She never did.
Ethan walked in moments later. Dressed perfectly.
Sharp.
Confident. But distracted. He barely looked at her. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. A simple question. But his response came quickly. Too quickly. "Just stay close tonight." A pause. "And try not to draw attention." The words were calm, but the meaning wasn't. Lila didn't respond immediately. She just nodded slowly, because she understood what he meant. More than he realized. And, for the first time in a long while, something inside her shifted. Not anger. Not sadness. Something quieter. Something deeper. Acceptance. But not the kind he expected. Moments later, they stepped onto the red carpet. Cameras exploded. Voices shouted his name.
Ethan.
Over here. Ethan, look this way. He smiled instantly. That perfect smile. The one the world adored. And beside him, Lila walked calmly, gracefully, unaffected by the chaos. But as the flashes continued, so did the whispers. She's blind, right? Why would he bring her here? He could do better. And Ethan heard them. Every word. And instead of ignoring them, he absorbed them, let them shape his thoughts, let them influence how he stood, how he spoke, how he looked at her. And that was the moment the real shift happened. Because, for the first time, Ethan didn't see Lila as his strength anymore. He saw her as something else. Something he needed to manage.
To control. To hide.
And Lila, she felt it, even without seeing his face. She felt the distance grow wider. Faster. And deeper than ever before. But she didn't stop him. She didn't question him. Because somewhere inside her, she already knew. Tonight wasn't just another event. It wasn't just another award. It was something else. Something bigger. Something final. And as they walked toward the stage, with thousands watching, with cameras capturing every second, there was one truth she hadn't spoken yet. One truth she had carried silently for years. One truth that could destroy everything Ethan had built. But she waited, quietly, patiently, because timing was everything. And tonight, the timing was finally right. But everything was about to change. The music inside the grand hall was soft, elegant, controlled. But beneath it, something else was building. Something heavier. Ethan and Lila took their seats near the front VIP section, where every camera angle could easily find them, where every expression mattered. And that was when it started. The first strange moment. A host walked past them, smiling politely. He greeted Ethan warmly, but when he turned to Lila,
his tone changed. Softer.
Careful. Respectful. Mrs. Monroe, it's an honor to have you here. Lila smiled gently. Thank you. Simple.
Calm.
But Ethan shifted slightly in his seat, almost uncomfortable. And that was the first sign.
Small.
Easy to miss.
But it meant something.
Moments later, another guest approached. A well-known actress. Beautiful. Confident. The kind of person Ethan had been seen with recently in headlines. She leaned close to him, whispered something, laughed softly, and then glanced at Lila.
Not kindly.
Not respectfully, but with something else. Judgment, curiosity, and a hint of pity. Ethan didn't stop it. He didn't correct it. He didn't even acknowledge it. He just smiled. That same polished smile. And that was when Lila's fingers tightened slightly around her dress. Barely noticeable, but it was there. Because she felt it. The shift. The distance. The quiet disrespect. The phone in Ethan's pocket buzzed.
Once. Twice.
3 times. He checked it quickly. Then locked the screen. But she heard it. Everything okay? Lila asked softly. A pause. Yeah, he replied. Too quickly. Again. That same tone. The one that hides something. But wait. It didn't stop there. Minutes later, his phone buzzed again. Longer this time. More persistent. And this time, he stepped away. I'll be right back. Lila nodded. Of course she did.
She always did.
But something about that moment
didn't feel right.
Because the air around her changed. The noise felt louder. The room felt colder. And for the first time that night, she felt alone. Completely alone. Across the hall, Ethan stood near a side entrance, speaking in a low voice. Tense. Sharp. You said this was handled, he whispered. A pause. His expression changed. That file should have been buried years ago. Silence. Then,
no.
She doesn't know anything. Another pause. Longer this time. And then, a slight hesitation. She can't. That was his mistake. Because even though Lila couldn't hear those exact words, she felt the weight of them. The distance. The urgency. The hidden panic. And when he returned, something about him
had changed. Subtle.
but real. He avoided touching her, avoided looking in her direction, avoided even speaking unless necessary. And that was when the repetition began. The small moments, one after another. He adjusted her posture unnecessarily, corrected her timing when she spoke, interrupted her once, then twice, then again, each time slightly sharper, each time slightly colder. But she didn't know.
No.
That wasn't true. She knew. She always knew, because people reveal themselves in the way they treat you when they think no one is watching. And tonight, everyone was watching, but Ethan had forgotten that. Or maybe he didn't care anymore. The show continued. Awards were announced. Speeches were given. Applause filled the room. But for Lila, none of it mattered, because something else was becoming clearer, stronger, more undeniable. Ethan wasn't just distant. He was preparing.
Preparing for something.
Something she hadn't seen before. And then, her name appeared on the screen. Not as a nominee, not as a presenter, but as part of a short tribute segment. A quiet acknowledgement of influential partners behind the stars. The audience clapped softly, respectfully. The camera turned toward her. And for a brief moment, the entire room focused on Lila Monroe. She sat still,
Composed.
unshaken. But beside her, Ethan stiffened, because this
Was not part of his plan.
that was the moment everything started falling apart. The screen behind them lit up slowly. Soft music played. Images began to appear. Moments from Ethan's early career. Old interviews. Behind-the-scenes clips. And then, a voice.
Come.
Narrative. Before the fame, before the spotlight, there was someone who stood beside him. A pause. The audience leaned in. Curious. Interested. Someone who saw his potential even when the world didn't. Another image appeared.
Blurry. Old.
But recognizable. Ethan, younger, uncertain. And beside him, Lila, holding his hand, smiling. The audience reacted softly. A mix of warmth and surprise. But Ethan didn't. His expression
Tightened.
because this wasn't just a tribute. It was something else. Something deeper. And then, the voice continued. Everything changed. The next image appeared. A hospital room. Dim lighting. Machines. And Lila, lying still. A bandage over her eyes. The room shifted. The energy changed instantly. Confusion. Whispers. Unease. She saw something.
No.
That wasn't it. She lost something.
But why? How?
The audience didn't know. And neither did most of the people in that room. Because that part of the story had never been told. Ethan swallowed. Hard. Because he knew exactly where this was going. And he wasn't ready. Not here. Not like this. Beside him, Lila sat still.
Silent.
But her breathing had changed. Slightly deeper. More controlled. And then, the voice paused. Long enough to make the silence uncomfortable. Silence. The screen faded to black. No explanation. No details. Just questions. Too many questions. The audience shifted in their seats. Murmurs spread. What happened to her? Was it an accident? Why haven't we heard this before? And that was the point. Half the truth. Just enough to open the wound. But not enough to close it. Ethan leaned slightly toward Lila.
His voice low.
Controlled. You knew about this? A pause. She turned her face toward him. Not perfectly, but enough. Yes. Simple.
Come.
Unshaken. Another pause. Longer this time. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. But even as he said it, he knew the answer. Because she had tried. Years ago. Many times. But he never listened. Now, it was too late. But that wasn't even the worst part. Because behind the stage, something else was happening. Something no one in the audience could see. A staff member rushed past another, whispering urgently. A tablet screen flickered. A video file loading slowly. And a single line appeared on the screen. Play after acceptance speech. Back in the hall, the host returned to the stage.
Smiling.
Energetic. Unaware of what was about to unfold. And now he announced the award for Best Actor. The tension rose instantly. Names were read. Applause followed. But everyone already knew. Everyone expected it. And the winner is a pause. A dramatic pause. Ethan Cole. The room erupted.
Cheers. Claps.
Excitement. Cameras flashing wildly. Ethan stood. Automatically. Instinctively. This was his moment. The moment he had worked for. The moment he deserved. But something about it
Didn't feel right.
not anymore. He walked toward the stage. Step by step. Each movement heavier than the last. Because somewhere behind him, Lila remained seated. Silent. Still. Waiting. And as he reached the microphone, as the applause slowly faded, as the spotlight centered on his face, there was only one thought in his mind. What else do they know? Because whatever was coming next, he could feel it. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole was afraid. But he didn't know. That fear was only the beginning. The applause was still echoing when Ethan reached the microphone. Bright lights. Cameras locked on his face. Thousands watching. And yet, for the first time in his life, he didn't feel in control. He forced a smile. That same familiar smile. But it didn't land the same way. Because something had already shifted in the room. Something subtle. Something uncomfortable. "Thank you," he began.
His voice steady. Practiced. Perfect.
"I've worked hard for this moment." The usual speech. The usual tone. But the energy?
Different.
People were listening, but not reacting the way they used to. Some faces were blank.
Some were thinking.
Some were waiting. And I want to thank everyone who supported me along the way. A pause. He glanced briefly toward the audience. Toward Lila. Just for a second. But it was enough. Because she wasn't looking at him. Not exactly. She was facing forward.
Calm. Still.
Unmoved. And, of course, he continued, forcing a slight laugh. My wife. The room quieted. Instantly. A strange silence. Heavy. Expectant. This emotional story wouldn't be complete without her, right? A few awkward chuckles. But nothing more. Ethan felt it. That shift again. That resistance. And instead of pulling back, he leaned in. That was his mistake. You all saw the tribute earlier, he said, his tone sharpening slightly. Very touching. A pause. Very dramatic. The word lingered. Uncomfortable. And honestly, he added, tilting his head slightly, people love a good real-life story, don't they? Now the room was completely silent. No laughter. No claps. Just attention. Focused.
Sharp.
Dangerous. But wait. He wasn't done. And since we're sharing truths tonight, he continued, maybe I should say this.
A breath.
A moment. A decision. I didn't ask for that kind of responsibility. The words hit. Hard. Some people shifted in their seats. Some frowned. Because now, this wasn't a joke anymore. She became blind, he said slowly, and suddenly, my life had to change too. A ripple moved through the crowd. Shock. Discomfort. Disbelief. I stayed, he added quickly, almost defensively. Most people wouldn't. That was it. That was the line. The one that changed everything. Because now, it wasn't just arrogance.
It was cruelty. Clear.
Undeniable. And for a brief moment, time slowed. The cameras stayed on him. The audience stayed silent. And somewhere in that silence, something broke. Then, a single sound. Clap.
Slow.
Sharp. Intentional. Everyone turned. One person. Standing.
Clapping.
Slowly. Then another. And another. Until the room was filled with a strange rhythm. Not celebration. Not admiration. Something else. Something heavier. Something judging. Because this wasn't applause for him. It was something entirely different. And Ethan felt it. For the first time, that stage didn't feel like power. It felt like exposure. What happened next was already slipping out of his control. The clapping didn't stop.
But it changed.
It grew louder, stronger, more unified, not in support, but in reaction. And then, the screen behind Ethan flickered.
Once. Twice.
Then came alive. He turned.
Slowly. Confused.
Unprepared. Because this wasn't part of the program. The audience turned with him. Every eye on the screen. Every breath held. And then, the video started. A dimly lit room. Years ago. A hospital. Voices in the background. Urgent.
Panicked.
And then, Ethan. Younger.
Desperate.
Do whatever it takes, he shouted. Just save my career. The room froze. Silence. Complete silence. Because no one expected this. No one can find out about the accident, his voice continued. I can't lose everything now. A doctor's voice responded.
Low.
Serious. There's a procedure, but it's risky. A pause. A long pause. And then, who's the donor? Another silence.
Heavy.
Unbearable. And then, Lila's voice.
Soft. Weak.
I am. The entire hall stopped breathing, because now, the truth was clear. The shocking truth. The one he buried. The one he mocked. The one he never thought would come out. She didn't just lose her sight. She gave it up. For him. For his future. The doctor said quietly in the recording. For his chance. The video cut. Abruptly. No music. No narration. Just silence. Pure silence. Ethan stood frozen. His face drained. His hands slightly shaking. Because there was no denying it. No escaping it. No controlling it. And then, he slowly turned. Back toward the audience. Back toward Lila, who was now standing.
Calm. Composed.
Unshaken. And for the first time, he looked at her properly. Not as an image. Not as a burden. But as the truth. Lila, his voice cracked. Barely holding together. I didn't. But the words didn't come. Because what could he say? What excuse could erase that? What lie could cover that truth? And then she spoke.
Soft. Steady. Clear.
That night. A pause. That call you ignored. The callback. The moment. The one he tried to forget. Was the last time I asked you to tell the truth. The room felt it. That line. That weight. That final blow. You didn't lose your career tonight, Ethan. She continued quietly. You lost yourself a long time ago. Tears filled his eyes. But they didn't change anything. Because this wasn't about regret anymore. This was consequence.
Real. Public.
Final. The audience erupted. Not with cheers. Not with joy. But with something raw. Voices. Reactions. Emotion. Shock turning into anger. Disappointment turning into rejection. And in that moment, everything changed forever. The noise didn't fade immediately. It lingered. Voices overlapping. People standing. Some shaking their heads. Others whispering in disbelief. And at the center of it all, Ethan Cole stood alone. Not physically. The stage was still beneath his feet. The lights were still on him. The cameras were still recording. But something had changed. Completely. Because for the first time in years, no one was looking at him with admiration. They were looking at him with something else. Disappointment. And worse,
clarity.
The illusion was gone. That perfect image he built, cracked in seconds. And there was no fixing it. Not here. Not now. Not ever. His hands dropped slowly to his sides. The award still in his grip. Heavy. Useless. Meaningless. Because what was an award, when everything behind it was built on a lie? Across the stage, Lila stood still.
Calm.
Unmoved. But not cold. There was no anger in her face. No bitterness. Just something deeper. Something quieter.
Peace.
The kind of peace that comes when you finally stop carrying something too heavy for too long. Ethan took a step toward her. Slow. Uncertain. Like a man walking into a truth he had spent years avoiding. Lila, he called softly. But his voice didn't carry the same weight anymore. It didn't command attention. It didn't hold power. It just existed. She turned her face slightly. Not fully, but enough. The same way she always did. And for a moment, everything went quiet again. Not because the room was silent, but because something inside that moment demanded stillness. I didn't know how to handle it, he said. The words stumbled out. Broken. Unsteady. I was scared. I was under pressure. I thought. He stopped, because even he could hear it. The excuses. Empty.
Late.
Useless. And for the first time, he didn't try to continue. He didn't try to defend himself, because there was nothing left to defend. Lila took a slow breath. Her fingers relaxed at her sides. I never asked you to be perfect, she said quietly. I only asked you to be honest. A pause. And you couldn't do that. Her words weren't loud. They didn't need to be, because truth doesn't need volume to be powerful. Ethan's eyes dropped, the weight of everything finally settling in. Not just what happened tonight, but everything before it. Every moment he ignored. Every truth he avoided. Every time he chose image over reality. And now, it had all caught up to him. All at once. You know, Lila continued softly, I used to believe something. A small pause. I believed that if I stayed patient, if I stayed quiet, you would remember who you were. Another pause. But I was wrong. Not harsh. Not angry. Just honest. And that made it hurt more. Because there was no fight left in her voice. No hope left to hold on to. Just acceptance. Complete and final. The audience watched. No interruptions. No distractions. Because this wasn't just a moment anymore. This was a conclusion. A quiet ending to something that had been breaking for a long time. Ethan took another step closer.
But stopped.
Because something inside him told him he had already gone too far. There are some distances you don't come back from. And this was one of them. I'm sorry, he said finally. Simple.
Soft. Real.
But late. Too late. Lila nodded slightly, acknowledging the words, but not accepting them. Because apologies don't erase truth. And they don't rebuild what was never protected. Without another word, she turned.
Slowly.
Gracefully. And began to walk away. No hesitation. No pause. Just forward. Because she didn't need to stay anymore. She didn't need to explain anything else. Everything had already been said. Everything had already been revealed. And as she walked off that stage, something shifted in the room again. But this time, it wasn't tension. It wasn't shock.
It was respect.
Quiet.
Deep.
Undeniable. Not for the man who stood frozen behind her, but for the woman who chose truth over silence. And for the first time that night, the applause returned. Soft at first, then stronger. Not explosive. Not dramatic. But meaningful. Because this time, it wasn't about performance. It was about reality. And Ethan, he didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't even look up. Because everything he had built, everything he believed defined him,
Was gone. Not slowly.
not over time, but in one single moment. The moment truth became louder than image. And there was nothing left to hold on to. Nothing left to protect. Nothing left to hide. Only silence. Only consequence. Only reality. But the lesson stayed. Sometimes, it's not the mistake that destroys everything. It's the moment you choose pride over truth. The moment you protect your image, instead of the people who stood by you. Because in the end, the world doesn't remember the fame. It remembers the truth. And the way you treated the people who loved you. What would you have done?